Thanks for joining me for another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And my next guest, Susan Brown, is a powerhouse. She is like, just go, 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 go. Guys, get out your notes. Get ready to take some notes. She gives some of the best advice I've ever heard. You are really going to enjoy this. This is somebody who came from being homeless in her car at age 22 to being an author, a writer, a speaker, a caregiver, owns several businesses, flips homes. I mean, you're really going to get a lot out of this. So enjoy. So, Susan, thank you so much for joining us on Think Your Way to an Epic Life.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here and thank you for having me. And to everybody listening, tune into Kara. She has a heart of gold. She's here to serve y'all, so get in her world. But yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Now, your Overcomers Academy. Oh my goodness. I can't imagine a person that could not be benefited by that. Every single successful person will tell you they've learned more from their failures than from their successes. So you're just putting yours out there on your sleeve and telling us all about it. Tell us how this started.
Well, yeah, it all started. Let's see, I'm 51 now. So I guess it started about 30 years ago when I made a lot of just stupid mistakes, landed homeless in my car, actually, and didn't know where to go, what to do. And I think the reason that this is so important, even though I'm so far removed from it to share, is that there's really only two things in life that change absolutely everything. And that's your relationship and your perspectives. And I should say your perspective and relationships. And when I say relationship, we think of people initially, but I'm thinking your relationship with everything, your relationship with money, your relationship with God, your relationship with your past, your relationship with your future, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with yourself, and your perspective on how you see that changes everything. So let me go back to being homeless in my car and how that relates to it. We tend to think in this Americanized culture that, oh, if people have money, the movies, what they've done is they've dramatized everything. And if you have money, you're a bad person and you do evil things. And if you're a poor person, then you're humble and you're good and you want right things. But I'm here to blow the roof off. That is such a farce, such a lie from the enemy. And the reason is you cannot have much in life and be very materialistic because it's really where your heart is, right? So, and you can have a lot of things and just want to give it away and not be attached to the things. So, first of all, that narrative is a lie. And the reason it's so important is when I was homeless living in my car, I was highly materialistic. All I could think was self centered me. Well, somebody should give me an opportunity, or somebody should give me this, or somebody should give me a handout, or I don't have this. And my entire perspective and vision was focused on what I did not have and what somebody should do for me. And so, first of all, I want us to get that in our head. And sometimes, actually, when you have less, it's easy to be more materialistic, okay? Because you're just thinking of what you don't have and can't do. And in that limited mindset, you are actually keeping yourself held back. And so it's important to remember that until your perspective changes, it won't even matter if you're in the right room with the right people. Because if your perspective's off, Kara, you're not going to recognize it and you're going to look at it from the wrong point of view. So God had a big work to do in me. And I still tell people to this day that being homeless alone, living in my car was the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing, bar none, because I had a reckoning to do with myself. And when I was complaining and this and that, God all of a sudden held a mirror up to my face and was like, okay, well, it's you living in your car. How did you get here? What are you going to do about it? And it's very humbling. And I think until you come to a reckoning with yourself, you are in the misconstrued mindset that the money will change everything, right? But again, we all know either personally, I'm sure you do too. I know personally people who are very, very wealthy, have a lot of material possessions, they have a lot of wealth in the bank, but they're miserable. I also know equally as many people who don't have those things and are also miserable. So money is not the denominator. Money is not the thing that changes things. You change everything up here. And when you change that, then you're open to be ready to receive those things. And then you have the mindset that you understand that not only do you have to work for it, but that you're in the driver's seat of being at peace of mind regardless of your circumstances. Because if we're a people that have become so weak and we say, oh, well, if my husband's good to me, I'll be happy. Or if my kids are obeying and I know where they are at all times, then I'll have peace of mind. Or if circumstances are going good, then I can be content. But that's actually takes zero talent. So, listeners, hold on because I'm not insulting you. I'm in the boat with you. Anything I say, I'm preaching to myself too, okay? Because you never get done this side of heaven, like with the growth, with the maturity, with the change, right? We're supposed to always be evolving. So, that being said, until you can flip the switch on your mindset, nothing in your life will actually change. And when you can create true peace of mind in your mind, if your husband's not being nice to you, if your kids are back talking and you're feeling miserable, if your business is backsliding, if you're not making money and you feel like a fraud, if during all those times you can be powerful in your mind and have true peace of mind, that's when the winning begins. That's when the change begins. And that's like what lights me up like nothing else. Because actually, when you change your mind in the midst of those dark circumstances, all of a sudden they're not so dark. And all of a sudden you're equipping yourself to be able to overcome those and actually change the circumstances yourself. So that's actually what started everything was, all those decades ago, homeless in my car, still the best thing that ever happened to me. Yeah.
And I know that probably a lot of people listening would just right in your face tell you that's not true. There's no way that was the best thing. I know it was the best thing. The
Oh,
worst things are the best things because they humble us and they make us like seek the right answers.
mhm.
So let's go back to you're homeless in your car. What age were you?
I was telling somebody that I was trying to think, when as we grow older, time gets so far removed. Um, I think I was 22, so maybe not quite 30 years ago. So I was like 22, and I probably lived in my car for about 6 months, which felt like 3 years at the time. Of course, anytime you're going through a hard season, it feels so much longer than it is. But yeah, so I was 22, and the way I got there is I had gone to college, and I'm quite sure I have undiagnosed ADHD, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. It's like, I don't think it's so much sparkly object as much as it is we have all these great ideas and great impact we desire to make and people we want to come alongside and serve. And we're like, oh, I could help them in this way and this way and this way. So I had, I think, 12 different majors by the time I dropped out after 4.5 years and having enough hours to have a degree and a half, but no degree because nothing was in the right, in the same thing. So I dropped out with a girlfriend of mine and we moved down to the beach, and she decided to move back. And I had, I had a good upbringing. My parents were teachers, and so we didn't have much growing up. And there wasn't a lot of, I think a lot of people that are my age from that 70s, 80s era can remember. You didn't really talk about the big three: money, sex, and death. Those were taboo topics. You don't talk about those. You'll just have to find out on your own, but you're not supposed to find out. It was this weird kind of dichotomy, right, of those. So there wasn't a lot of financial education. So I didn't even know how to manage a checkbook or take care of my stuff. So it was really just a lack of knowledge, lack of knowing on my part. And again, I'm not blaming my parents at all. It was even the schools in those day and age, and so it just wasn't something that was talked about. And so when my roommate moved back, it was just a math problem. I didn't have enough money to pay the bills. And I was at a place in my life. I was so angry and I was so bitter. I often joke that the me now would not like that girl. You wouldn't like that girl, but that's okay because that girl needed to exist to get to this one. Um, but I was very bitter. I was very angry, and I knew I could go back home to my parents, and I knew that they would welcome me, but I knew I would then be stuck there. And I knew that that would be my identity: the girl who couldn't crack it, the girl who at 22 dropped out of school, moved down the beach, and had to move back in with her parents. And there was something in me that said, don't do it, Susan, because if you don't, there was this internal struggle, right? And I knew I was fighting with myself. I knew I was fighting with God. And I knew I needed to be alone for that. I knew that there was this reckoning happening, but I couldn't quite call it that because I was in it. And I was just so full of anger and bitterness. I was like, well, I'll just live in my car. Like, I'm not going back home. And so it was really this moment of, I was bartending, and there's nothing wrong with that. But on top of that, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and they were doing all kinds of bad things, even illegal things. And by the grace of God, I wasn't doing those things. But, be careful who your circle is, right? Because you'll become that. And so I knew in that little subconscious part of my mind, I shouldn't be there. I knew that this wasn't the crowd for me, but I didn't know what else to do. And I was just, again, angry, bitter, materialistic. So one night I was just yelling at God, yeah, I don't have anything. I just have my car. I have nothing to do. And I was just yelling, and I had pretty much turned my back on God. And all of a sudden it was like he whispered to me, you have a car. And I was like, I know, and that's all I have. And I was so angry, and I was just back talking and doing that head shake and that southern, I'm gonna take my jewelry off, God, I'm just mad. And it was like another whisper came, you have a car. And literally, Kara, it was like this light bulb moment where I was like, oh my gosh, it was an entire switch where I realized the very thing I was complaining about, the very thing that made me so desperate was my biggest asset. I had a vehicle. What the heck? I wasn't actually on the streets. I had a vehicle to get out of the weather. I had a vehicle to lock the doors for safety. I had a vehicle to get to job interviews. I had a vehicle to drive for food, to move from parking lot to parking lot for safety. I had an asset, but I was so selfish minded I couldn't see it. And that asset was going to be the very thing that brought me to where I am now with my mindset shift. And so that's how it kind of all started, was God like literally shifted my perspective. And so that's why, like, my first book, When You're Thankful Thursdays, it sounds so simplistic because everybody talks about gratitude, but I talk about it in a completely different way. And I love acronyms. So for me, each word means something deeper with an acronym and gives it the depth of its meaning. And so for me, gratitude is literally a life saving, future transforming perspective, because if you can become so good at using gratitude to look at everything, then even the hard, unthinkable things like death, right? Like caregiving for my completely paralyzed mom, it's like you don't have to necessarily be grateful for the bad thing, but you can be grateful for all the good things that make you recognize how you miss those. So, for example, like when my mom finally died after years of caregiving for her, is like, God, I'm grateful that I did have a mom. I'm grateful that I did get to know her for a time. I don't have to say I'm grateful that she was paralyzed, because obviously I'm never going to say that. But if you can learn to use gratitude to see everything differently, it then softens your heart, keeps you from anger and bitterness, and opens your eyes to see what is truly there that you are missing because you're looking with the wrong lens.
Whew, girl, you have done some soul searching, and
And
so
that's
you're
just the first
homeless.
step in our Overcomer Academy. Because I love words, I'll give you the acronym. It's GIVES, which I think is easy for women to remember because we feel like all we do is give, right? But it's gratitude, intention to invest, and then you have to flip it and invest in your intention, vision, execution, and surround, and so. And so, yeah, it's the system. It works. You could literally give me anybody's life an example how they went from here to here, and I could actually map out for you how they use that, even if they didn't know they were using it. Because a lot of us, we don't have our systems. We have it and we're doing it, but until we're over on the other side and we look back, we don't actually have it laid out of what it was we were doing, right? And so that is the same with that. Obviously, I didn't know that it was the gives at the time, but these are the things I can look back and tell you I was doing with that, with every single thing in my life. And you can use it in the good times. I used it before I got on this podcast with you. I was like, God, thank you for Kara. Thank you for all the people she's serving. Thank you for this opportunity. I intend to invest on being present, on giving my best, the best for her and her audience. And then my vision was of this, you and I having this beautiful conversation and hopefully serving the people that need to hear it. And then the E is the execution. You just got to get in there and do the work. And then the S for surround and so is, you have to surround yourself with the people you want to be like, or be in the room with the people. And the surround for this looks like your audience listening, right? And you and I being together. And then the so is paying it forward. And that's part of the work as well. So,
Wow, very intentional. You have a very intentional life. So you're homeless. You're 22 years old. You realize that your car is an asset. What happens
mhm.
next?
Okay, so then that's where it gets really exciting. Is so then it became like this contagious thing where I couldn't stop, and I started listing all the different things that my car could help me do. And what happened is then I was like, well, God said, what's your intention, Susan? What do you intend to do with it? And I think, This is really important in this world today that is so self serving, that is so entitled, that just thinks the sky should, hand us whatever we want. What are you going to do about it? At some point, you have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to stop blaming other people. You have to stop blaming your past, stop blaming what circumstance you're presently in. And you have to actually look in the mirror. And this is the tough love part, right? But I needed it. And a lot of us need it. I mean, I share this, this works with my kids, but God literally said, and what do you intend to do about it? What are you going to invest in? And here's something I want to kind of kick in the teeth too is as Americans, when we hear the word invest, what do we think of?
Money.
We think of money, right? But the problem with that is this is that when you and I invest something, it's not always money, right? What are you and I investing right now to be here together? We're investing our time, we're investing our mind, we're investing, finances by keeping the light on. Thank goodness we're bought clothes and we're wearing clothes, so I want us to think of investing is as a whole person. Like, what are you willing to pour into? So even as a homeless person, I had something I could invest, right? My time. And so what I decided is, okay, God, I'm willing to go all in. I'll invest all of me in this. And my vision became, well, I don't need to sleep in my car. It's kind of scary. I'm just going to work around the clock and do what I got to do and get to work to get a home, right? So my vision became the goal was the home. So what happened is I went into work that night and I told my boss at the bartender, I said, listen, I understand if you need 2 weeks notice. I said, and it's been a great place to work, no fault of anybody, but I need to quit. And if I can, I need to quit right away. And I didn't have another job lined up, Kara. So this was
Woo!
not, yeah, this was not ideal, right? I needed to have money to, put gas in the car to get places, but I knew that I knew. And all of a sudden the fire had been lit and I knew things were about to radically change. And at that moment in time, I actually became the person I am now. But you have to be careful who you share that with, because if I had shared that with anybody back then, of course they would have laughed. Who are you? You're not. So be very careful. And people say, build it in public, build it in public. That's great. Maybe if you're like Richard Branson level or whoever, but I'm very careful with that because nothing kills the dreams like small minds. And you have to be very careful and very intentional who you share around, who you build with, right? So thankfully he was gracious. He said, I understand. He goes, if you can just give me tonight and work tonight, then that can be it. I said, great. Thank you so much. So that was my last night of work. And then the next day I got 2 jobs. I started waiting tables in the evening. And during the day I was working at a real estate company where I was like, had the little headset and I was doing like the condo rentals. Okay. Just in a little cubicle. And then I think, and I was very careful not to let anybody know I was homeless because I didn't want to lose my job. So I kept the car very clean. I had 1 pair of pants and 4 shirts, and I would just rotate, and I would go to the public bathroom and shower. And I was just very particular. And I would talk to myself a lot in the, use your own name. I would say, Susan, you are not this person anymore. So it's time to get to work. Own up. You're the CEO. Let's get in here and take care of this business. And so you have to really talk to yourself. Sometimes you are in a space in life where you don't have the crew around you, or maybe you have a family members who don't believe in you. You can still do this. You can still do this. If you're in a bad spot, living in a bad area, and you're surrounded by bad people, you can still do this. So it's time to
Preach
take that
it.
personal responsibility back. You have to just be almost get angry at it, not at yourself, not at what's around you, but your situation and go, you know what? To heck with it. Enough is enough. And with that intention to invest, Kara, it's really important too that a part of that is what are you willing to give up? If you're currently investing 2 hours of watching Netflix a night, are you willing to invest in those 2 hours in a growth mindset podcast like Kara's here? Are you willing to invest an hour of that of building funnels, an hour of that of this? So the reason that the eye is so important is because it is the mirror and you can't get away from it. So if you say, oh, this is bad, this is bad. Okay, I would say, what are you intending to invest to change it? And now you have to flip that around. Now it's time to go invest in your intention. And again, I didn't have money, but I had time. And so my vision became, well, you know what? And I was a young single girl. This is before fasting was a cool thing. I could just eat 1 meal a day and be fine. And I'm willing to invest that little bit of money, save it, put it aside. every little piece I wanted to save up because the goal was a safe home, right? That was the goal I became obsessed with. So then came the V, the vision. But what's cool about this is that there was something more that God brought me. Is after work at night, I would drive to this beautiful furniture store, Kara, and I can still picture it in my mind. It was on the beach, and the parking lot that didn't face the beach was all glass. Okay, so it was beautiful. You could see all the pretty things in there, and there were those like just kind of spotlights on that were subtle at night. So I would pull up and I'd be wearing my ball cap. I tried to look like a tough guy with my mace in my hands so nobody would mess with me. And I was in my car and I would stare at this bed that at the moment I thought was beautiful. I'm sure I wouldn't now, but it was like a four-poster mahogany ornate detailed bed. But to me, it was breathtakingly beautiful because of where I was, right? So I would pull up and I would just stare at that bed. And again, this is before I even knew anything about, vision and everything. And so I would stare at that bed and I was like, Susan, that's the goal. That's the goal. That's what you're working towards. And I think too often too, with the sparkly object, we got to stay dead focused. You got to have something, even if it's your mission. It's okay if you have like a book and a podcast and these things going on, but stay focused on your mission and your why. And I was became so obsessed with that a couple weeks later I pulled up and something really strange happened. I was still in the car, but when I looked at the bed, I saw myself in there, and I saw myself pulling
Ooh.
those covers up, and it looked so warm. And then a couple weeks later, something really next level happened, and it sounds creepy. And it sounds like all the woo woo manifestation, which I'm not into, but I am into true vision. And I can share some of that for anybody. I just listen, everything for me has to come back to Jesus. So it's just because he's the only reason I'm alive and here. So that's kind of the angle everything comes from. So I'm going to share some scripture in just a minute about that. That's so cool. But I pulled up a couple weeks later and I didn't break into the store. So hear me, it was very strange, but I'm looking at the bed and all of a sudden, I was actually in the bed. Instead of looking at me in the bed, I could feel it. And I was looking at myself back in the car. And that bed was mine and I knew it. And so, again, I had already stepped into that future self and I was just going through the roles. But here's where it gets good. If it's okay, can I share this really
Go
cool
for it.
scripture? Okay. So, this is in Second Kings. I just discovered this last year. It's just the coolest thing. The king of Aram was chasing after Elisha, and he was going to go kill him. And he had surrounded the city. And and Elisha was asleep somewhere, like in his house. And one of his servants came out and saw the city surrounded. And he runs into Elisha, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? They've got us surrounded." And he was panicked. And I'm going to read this verse verbatim because it's so striking. In verse 17, I think this is 2 Kings 6. I'll look and find it if you want to drop it later. And Elisha prayed, and listen when I say what he prayed, what he didn't pray. Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. And then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of chariots and horses of fire all around. And so what's interesting is Elisha didn't pray, God protect us, God save us, because he could see God's army behind the physical one that Elisha's servant could see. And he didn't say protect us. He didn't say save us. Elisha didn't say, what are we going to do? Elisha could see it. And he said, open his eyes, Lord. And God did. So again, we don't see anymore. We just look so much at this physical, but there's a whole invisible realm around us. And some of that involves our future and our past self. And you have to just be willing to forgive that version of yourself and step into the beautiful you without all that false guilt that the world wants to surface on you. Because without that, if you're weighed down with the guilt, you won't be able to get into the vision and get into the E, which is the execution and the work. So with the work, and some of this kind of like threads together and it happens simultaneously, as you're having the vision, you're also doing the work. And it's kind of like a running montage of over and over again. But what's really cool is, so I had the two jobs, and there was a girl who I think figured out my dilemma at the place I was waiting tables, but she was gracious enough not to say anything. And she was like, "Hey, are you looking for another job?" And I was like, "Heck yeah, always, what you got?" And she said, okay, so listen, if this doesn't sound like a menial of meaningless jobs, but I was so excited because I had a goal, right? I had my vision and I was already this new person. So I had to get through the mud to get to this glory, right? So she said, well, my sister owns a company that cleans dishes, like new dishes out of packaging to give to restaurants, to sell to them. I was like, okay. She said, so it's at this storage unit at night after our shift, and we'll sit in the truck and with bottled waters and cloths clean these. And it was $4 an hour. And I was like, let's go. And so here I was in the back of this truck in this dark storage unit with this girl, and we would have these boxes of plates, and we'd pour water and with rags clean them. Every now and then somebody'd sketchy pull up, we'd have to get in the car. But we would have these deep life conversations. And I remember even at that moment thinking, God, this is the good stuff. This is the stuff you're using to propel me forward. And so what I decided to do is I had those three jobs and I just slept a few hours at night because I didn't want to sleep in my car anyway. It's terrifying, right? And it was some of the most beautiful time of my life because here's the other thing, and you might be able to guess it. Not many people can. And a lot of it is because, I mean, that's not a very common situation. One of the biggest blessings during that time was that God showed me I had more of this one thing than I would ever have for the rest of my life, ever. Can you guess what it was?
Time.
I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I didn't, and think about this, I didn't have a home to clean or to be burdened with the stuff or the bills to pay. I literally had this massive gift that was disguised as looking like a burden to the world, that was disguised as looking as, oh, less than or menial. But no, Kara, I had been given this massive blessing of nothing but time. Here I was, a single, healthy, able bodied girl with nothing but time. And so God was testing me, what are you going to do with it, Susan? And so I got to work. I'm like, let's go, God, let's get down and dirty. And I think that's the wrong thing too. Everybody thinks, oh, it's just got to be this beautiful, light, fluffy experience. There is zero entrepreneurs, zero successful people, however you define that in life, that have ever not got their hands dirty at some point. Nobody, you know? I mean, even some of the biggest billionaires, they say, I've been broke more times than I've been, wealthy and then had to build it back up. So I just think it's so encouraging because when you can change your perspective, literally everything changes. And then the surround and so looked for me like, well, at the time being homeless, I wanted to be around employed people. I wanted to be around people who were doing things bigger than me. And that just meant going to these jobs, showing up on time, being ethical with myself. If I had to be somewhere at 1 o'clock, be sure I'm there at 12:45. And then if I, saw somebody who was struggling and they were maybe a step lower than me, was to sow and pay it forward, bring them up, give them some clues of success. And so that's what that looked like as far as the homeless thing. And still
Can
to
I
this
interrupt you
day,
just for a second?
trying.
Because
Yeah.
I'd love it if you went just a little deeper into the integrity with me. Because I think my listeners probably all know the definition of integrity is you do what you're supposed to do even if no one's looking. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, and you're right. It does go deeper than that. Doing what is right when nobody's looking, but then I would say plus 10. And then you got to up that and plus 100. And then you got to up that because the thing is, if you never up it, then you're not truly evolving and changing. And if I really was this person now, homeless living in my car, then I was going to keep upping the integrity, right? Because what worked for me when I was single and could be homeless and bartending hanging around that was not going to work for the person working three jobs. It's not going to work for the person writing a book. It's not going to work for the person caregiving for her paralyzed mom, having babies and almost dying on the floor in front of them. That's not going to work. So your integrity, it's not enough to just do the right thing when nobody's looking. You have to be constantly looking for ways to exceedingly do above and beyond more, basically putting your best stuff out there when nobody's looking. Because then when people are looking, you're going to so far surpass, you have to just keep up leveling that. There's no other way, really. I talk to my
Well,
kids a lot
plus
about this too. It's
it
just like,
well
yeah, go
it
ahead.
it tells you that you can count on you. And I think people really know for a fact that they can't count on themselves. They know they can count on themselves to let themselves down. So
Okay.
when you go the direction you're going, Take
And
it.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Now I'm getting really, really giddy because I like to really, really, really geek out on the physical subconscious of our brain. Again, not in the woo woo way, but what people have taken and made woo woo is actually quite real. Part of my story too is I was a paramedic and a health and safety director to the Red Cross during 9/11. And so I really love anatomy and the brain and how psychology works. And so one thing that's really cool that Kara is saying, now y'all listen to me closely because Kara is dead on, is so there is a base, a bundle of nerves at the base of our brainstem, and it's called your RAS, your reticular activating system. And I don't know if y'all have ever heard of the red car effect, but that's part of it. But there's three responsibilities to this RAS. Number one is your sleep. I mean, they're not really in any particular order. I'm just going to label them one, two, and three. One is your sleep. Two is your habits, and three is your focus. Now, what we all know is your habits and focus can actually kind of overlap, right? So, when you change those habits, it'll affect your focus. When you change your focus, it affects your habits. Now, what's interesting is, and this is what I coach a lot of people on, is it's really, really important if you're going to train yourself, as Kara brought up, to be a person of integrity, is, and this sounds really, really goofy. I want you, this is a tangible thing. Start saying out loud the thing you're about to do, but say less than. And everybody listening is like, what? This is about an epic life. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, listen to me. Your subconscious is always paying attention to you. Okay. Now, I'll give examples of things I'm not going to do right now, only because I have built it so strong and I can risk doing this. Let's say I want to start going to the gym again. Okay. Because this is a very typical example. We all know this, and the holidays are coming and New Year's coming. Everybody knows what's coming with all that. Let's say I say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym today and I'm going to run a mile on the treadmill, but I haven't run in 6 months and maybe the gym is 20 minutes away and I haven't actually looked at my day and what could come up. If I don't go to the gym, then what I just taught my subconscious, and you won't notice it. Here's what's really important, listeners. You won't even notice it, but your subconscious goes, oh, Susan's nobody of consequence. We don't actually have to do anything we say. Okay. Same thing if I say, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. tomorrow and the alarm goes off and I don't get out of bed, my subconscious sees that and it says, oh, again, Susan is not a person of consequence. So have you ever met those people that, like, if Kara and I lived in the same town, if I said, hey, Kara, I'll be at the coffee shop to meet you at 12:30. And if, let's say, we had a consistent like coffee date time, okay, and it was Wednesdays at 12:30, and let's say I always show up at 12:45, what have you learned about me as a person, Kara?
They can't count on you.
You can't count on me. I don't value your time. I don't value my time. And I probably think I'm better than you. Right. So all these things, and it tells you in that little bit, listeners, that tells her all she needs to know about me. Right. First of all, I'm not that person. If I show up late, y'all be like, oh my gosh, is she dead? Like, was, but, and so there are those exceptions, but I'm saying a pattern of consistency. Now, here's where it gets different. Okay. I was coaching a lady on this and she didn't understand until the end of the day. And then she's messaging me going, oh my gosh, this is crazy. She had just moved in and she was struggling with organization. Okay. And she showed me her house was like a bomb went off. And I said, okay, we usually start with the smallest room in the house because you need to see a win and you need to train your subconscious. So, is your bathroom, show me your bathroom. Is it doable? She's like, yeah. I said, okay, give me one more thing you want to do today. She's like, well, I want to drink 80 ounces of water. I said, okay, how much water, like if the world caved in and your house was on fire, how much water do you always drink on a daily basis? Because, like, for me, I've got coffee in my cup. I've gotten really bad about my water drinking. So if it was me, I would say, I'm going to go for 8 ounces. Y'all, it's so bad. Um, but she said, well, I always drink two of my 16-ounce Stanleys. And I said, always. And she said, yes. I said, if you were to wake up sick and, your fridge leaked out, would you still drink those two 16-ounce cups? And she said, yes. I said, okay, here's what I want you to say. I said, I want you to be very careful with your words. And that's something as people of integrity, we have, the people without integrity or that think it's not a big deal that they've lost. You need to say things like, I choose, or I decide, or I am. Don't say I will, because that's like, if I get to it. Okay, it's very important. So I told her, I said, I want you to look in the camera and I want you to say, I decide to drink 16 ounces of water today. I choose to purge and clean my bathroom. And that's it. She's like, Susan, but I said, no, 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 listen, it's really important. You say you're less than your bare minimum. So what happened? So not only did she say it, but this is something I learned from years ago when I was in counseling that is, I recommend everybody should go to counseling at least once or twice in their life. It's amazing. Is that it's really important you hit all the different places. Okay. You can't just say something, but when you say it, and you're going to feel like a ding dong, like I do it with washing the dishes. If I'm standing there and I see that the sink is full and I know I have the time, it's really important. You're always training your subconscious. Never stop doing this. I say, I will clean or I choose to decide to clean the dishes right now. The whole sink will be clean. And then I do it. Doesn't matter if the kids come in running and screaming, you'll have to wait because you're always training your subconscious. Okay. When you say things out loud, you feel goofy. I don't even care anymore. Once you pass 50, I don't care what people think. It's just, I'm 51 now and I love it. It's so freeing. Um, but that being said, once you say it out loud, you've said it, owned it. It's come back into your ears to hear it, which is then planted in your subconscious. But that's not enough. With this lady, I had her write it down. So then you're actually claiming it with your hand, you're writing it, and you're visually seeing it as you write it. Then I had her take ownership by texting a picture of that to me and to put it in the private Facebook group as well. So she did that. And by the end of the day, she messaged me. She goes, "Oh my gosh, I drank 6 things of water and I didn't just clean the bathroom. I also tackled my tiny kitchen." I said, "Yes, because what happens is, Kara, when you're retraining your brain, and we're never done, so don't ever think we never get to another level where we're stopped. What happened is when she set the bare minimum, her brain already knew, oh, I can do that. And so then when you have this time left and your brain goes, oh, dang, Susan's a person of consequence. Crap, we got to at least do that. What else can we come up with? And your brain's coming up with new habits. And so she drank extra water and then cleaned an extra room. And the next day, the same thing happened. So if you want to write a book, you can't say one day, okay, I'm going to write a book today. No, you're literally setting yourself up for disaster. You have to start tiny because you got to say the minimum thing, which I know is so hard for us big high achievers and big cold people, but that's how you get there. You have to say the little things and you have to plant that there, let your brain watch you do it. And then all of a sudden your brain's like, oh, and that's when you start to up level. And that's when you can say, oh, I'll finish my book today, and I'll edit my podcast and I'll launch that new funnel. And then you can do all those things in a day when you get there. And people ask, I'm sure people ask you, Kara, people ask all the time, how do you get so much done in a day? I'm like, well, it's practice. It didn't start off like this. But now when I think, oh, we did all that in a day. Yeah, that's just a typical Tuesday. And not in a bragging way, but in a confident, content way that you know that there's keys to get there. So when you speak to the integrity and the training, yeah, that got me all excited because I love the subconscious and how God wired it and what it does. And it's always paying attention, always. If you say you're going to play a game with your kids, this is not just about work related. This is being very careful what you say out of your mouth, because if you then don't do it, your brain has no reason to believe you. And then the people around you won't. Like if I was that person that always showed up late to mine and Kara's coffee date, she will know not only am I not a person of integrity and I don't value her time, but she would never, recommend me to anybody for whatever business it is I have. And in fact, she would probably warn her good friends against me and say, hey, be careful. She's never been on time. I'm not sure she actually even can tell time. Right. So being a person of integrity is highly important because it's who you are. You know, people are going to say things about you anyway. Let it be good things, to the point that like if
Absolutely.
yeah, to the point that like to the other side of the coin, if we did live near each other, we had a coffee date and we were both always 5 minutes early, we both know, oh, we're both people of integrity. On the flip side of that, if somebody was trash talking me to Kara, she would say, well, I don't know who you're talking about because that's not the Susan I know. Right. So build in the natural defense of who you are as your character, not just to sleep well at night and look in the mirror and take personal responsibility, but for the people around you. That's how you actually show them true love. It would not be loving, if we showed up consistently late for each other. I will say, I think I was, so the listeners can hear this. I don't know if I was like 1 minute early or something. I logged on 6 minutes early, but you probably didn't see that because it said update your browser. I was like, what? Oh my gosh. And so I'm like, what in the world? And I'm like, da, 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 da. And so when I logged in on my clock, it was like 11:29 or 11 or 10:29 my time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope she can forgive me. So there are those things. But again, as a general rule of principle, be the person that people always know that they can count on and that your brain knows when you say something out loud, it has no choice but to find ways to make it happen.
I absolutely love that riff. I mean, that right there should just go down in history because it's so powerful. And guys, please hear Susan's heart when she's telling you this. Atomic Habits tells you the same thing. If you're going to run a marathon, just commit that you're going to walk out to the mailbox every day and then do it. And then it builds and it builds. And it really is amazing. If you can't count on yourself, guys, you're going to stay stuck. And once you realize that you're out looking for all this acceptance and this love and everything from everybody else in the world, you have got to start taking care of yourself and know that you can count on you. So who is the perfect client for you, Susan?
Well, first of all, I would say you and I both know as working with people, not everybody is for me and I'm not for everybody. So I'm not that person that has some big ego in play saying, I can help everybody because we're all wired for different people. For some people, I'm too much. For some people, I'm not enough. Same for you. We're all just wired different. So that being said, I always welcome conversations, shoot me an email and jump on a call and see. But ideally, it's that person that they know there's the struggle but they're willing to do the work. I am not the person that is going to be like, here, I'll just do it all for you, because you're paying me and here you go. The main thing is because that's not going to serve them. That doesn't help
Well, you
anybody.
can't do it for them anyway.
It doesn't help me with my time and my goals that I'm doing, and it doesn't help you at all long term. So, my ideal person has typically been, I can tell you what my typical client has been, majority women, but I work with men. I work with anybody, and I just do put it out there that for me, everything comes back to Jesus. So, if that's something that's not for you, that's okay too. I have friends I can recommend to you, and I work with anybody, Jesus loving or not, men or female, whatever, as long as it's the person that is willing to take instruction, that they are teachable and they're willing to get in there, get dirty, get the job done, and they like to move fast. Speed, love, success. I'm very fast because I've gotten to that point, right? I've trained my subconscious. I just do things very fast. So be teachable, be ready to work. And, I would say no, maybe your three biggest struggles, or be willing to let me help you identify them.
And guys, if you want to check out Susan, please check her out on Facebook, the Overcomer Academy, and it is a wealth of information. So you can check her out, like kind of like privately, and then if they want to do a call with you, how does that work?
Yeah, well, and I have a calendar, but I mean, if you just want to shoot me an email at hello@legacygamechangers.com and be like, hey, I'm not sure. I know you said we could jump on a call. I usually try to keep those at 10 minutes or under, but yeah, and go to legacygamechangers.com. You can kind of read about me there, see if I'm your jam or your mojo or not. And also if maybe I'm not for you, I love connecting other people. So like how Kara and I are here meeting each other and I just instantly love her and I love her energy. Um, don't think that if for some reason we're not for each other, I wouldn't have your best interest at heart and point you in the right direction to somebody else, that might be. I might notice that you have a specific thing you're looking for that is not my specialty, and I can point you to somebody that is. So truly, my heart is just for you to actually help you achieve those gains you're looking for, whether it's myself that helps you get there or not. So yeah, just email me hello@legacygamechangers.com and we can jump on a call. On the site, I do have available like a 1 hour purchase call or accountability for 1 week in a custom plan. But as far as the one-on-one coaching, I like to have a conversation first, and then we'll just jump in like gangbusters. And those I don't do any more than a 3 month coaching of one-on-one, and that's because it takes 3 months to form a habit, and because things change, our goals change, and I don't want to commit to coaching somebody for a year because I have other plans that might shift, and because our family travels a lot, and because with 3 months, I'm going to be all in, dead focused on you, and it's going to keep you moving quicker too. You're like, oh my gosh, we only have 3 months. I got to get to it. So that's how my one-on-one works. Yeah.
Okay, outstanding. So, what books, podcasts have helped you get to where you are now?
Yeah, as cheesy as it sounds, I've really been interested in diving into the Bible lately in a way that I never had before. And one way is, and I'll try and find a link and I can send it to you. There's a Bible that's written in chronological order, like the order it actually happened. and it's been blowing my mind. It's so radically different from how I've ever read it before. And to be honest with you, like honestly, the best success principles, they're in the Bible, right? I sometimes joke with people I have no original ideas or either from Pinterest or the Bible, But that being said, I also do love, I'm a big fan of Dr. Ben Hardy. I appreciate his work. I love the 10X book. I have it up here, and oh, 10X is easier than 2X. Sorry, I had to peek to see what the name of it was. But for me, the Bible is the main thing just because I love getting success principles from people like Myron Golden, Ben Hardy, and things like that. But I always take it and measure against the ultimate source of truth for me, which is the Bible. And so, for example, one of those things that I differ on people a little bit is, and I think women are wired this way, is so many people say, stay focused on one thing, just do the one thing, just do the one thing. But the Bible actually tells us, not to get the scripture reference, start 7 business ventures because you don't know which one will be successful. And I do think, not to get overwhelmed, like you don't necessarily want to start a cleaning business and a restaurant at the same time. But I think as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of different businesses inside of our main business, right? So, like, I have books, but I also do speaking engagements. I also do coaching. We also, this crazy opportunity just landed in our lap that we're about to announce, but we also, my husband and I flip houses. We're real estate investors. And so one of the cool things we get to do now is we actually bought our first house to house the homeless to bring families out of homelessness. So coming full circle from being homeless to getting to actually, serve people and help them get out of there too is like super exciting. So, stay focused on your one mission, but just be open to the Bible because sometimes we take things and we thwart them or we go, well, this person was successful and they did this. But if you look at the underlyings, it's usually that person has multiple things going on too. And that not to say you can't be hugely successful off one thing, but just saying no guilt if you have these different business ideas. That's actually biblical, So, yeah.
Very cool. And last question for everybody. Everybody has to answer this question. This is think your way to an epic life. So, what tips, tricks, ideas can you leave our listeners with to help them think their way to their own epic life?
Okay, well, I'll share this one with you. And this is actually, I have a free little video training at livefreechecklist.com that goes alongside this. But I share my 3 top mindset habits because, again, our habits is what trains us. But the first one I share is so important and it goes along with that personal responsibility and integrity is to think like the CEO of your life. And this is really important because we can think like a victim, we can think like a martyr, we can think like a judge. But if you think like the CEO, what happens is you put your emotions on the shelf for a minute and you're able to say, well, I thought this was a good idea, but that's not really financially smart. Or I thought this person might work out as my assistant, but that's not. And you're able to kind of delegate and take a step back. And sometimes we don't take that 30,000 foot view enough because we're so in it, right? We're like, oh, we're down here with all the pieces. But if you start to think like a CEO, and the pro tip with that is take an index card and with a black Sharpie, and this is important to your subconscious, write CEO and your name, CEO Susan Brown, CEO Kara Shug, and you tape that to your monitor and you remind yourself that's how you make decisions, not from a place of lack, not from a place of nervousness, not from a place of desperation, not from a place of fear, but from a place of, oh, heck, I'm the CEO of my life. And it doesn't matter where you are. So I don't want to hear any back talk, people. And I'm saying that with all love. Okay. Like I was thinking like the CEO of my life, living homeless in my car, same thing when I was caregiving for my paralyzed mom. It was scary, but I didn't have time to shrink and go, oh my gosh, somebody help me. No, I had to cowgirl up and be like, crap, Susan, this is on you. Let's get to it. So you have to give yourself permission to think like the CEO of your life. And that's okay. Here's a bonus tip before we jump off this really important. And I can tell you were kind of alluding to some of this, Kara, is when we talk about your circle you're around, it's okay if other people don't respect your boundaries, but you don't have to stay there. For example, if you are starting to think like the CEO of your life, right? And let's take the example back to like if Kara and I lived in the same town and we had a Wednesday standing 12:30 coffee date, right? If I consistently show up late for her, and that's not part of her CEO thinking, she doesn't have to show up at all anymore. And in fact, she doesn't even really owe me a phone call, right? And she could even have her assistant just say, hey, shoot Susan a quick text and just say something's come up and that's no longer on my schedule. So as the CEO, you also don't burn bridges. You have no need to be a jerk. Like she doesn't need to say, hey, you were always late, I'm out of there. So again, CEO takes the emotions and puts them on the shelf. It equips you to be able to make sound decisions that are accurate and true without getting so worked up about it. But that's probably one of my favorite tips, is to think like the CEO of your life, not the consumer. And this affects everything. So if you're on social media, are you scrolling and being a consumer? Or are you thinking like the CEO? Are you getting on there and making decisions and doing things? In your marriage, are you thinking like the consumer? What can my husband do for me? Or, oh, he's been late, or I don't, or are you thinking like the CEO and going, well, I could love myself. I could take a spa bath. Think like the CEO of your life in all areas, not just business, but not the consumer. Think like the CEO.
It's beautiful. Susan Brown, thank you so much for
Oh,
just
thank you.
dumping so much wisdom and good
It
stuff
was a
on
dump, wasn't
us.
it?
It was a lot. It was a lot. I'm going to watch this one again several times and take notes because you gave so much really, really good sound advice, and can't thank you enough for your time.
Well, I'm thankful to be here. And again, y'all listeners, tune into Kara's world. She has your best interests at heart. She's amazing. So subscribe to all her things, get all of her things, just get in her world. That's part of the surrounding so get in Kara's world. There's not just me, there's a lot of people on here that are here to serve you. So stay in her world. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.